balancing her food warmers filled with steaming rice, beans, and rich, spicy banga soup with bush meat that had earned her the love of countless pedestrians. The air was thick with the aroma of freshly cooked food, and before she could fully set up, a queue had already begun to form. As she served her eager customers, her eyes caught an unsettling sight. A frail, disheveled old woman crouched near the edge of the street, picking at scraps of food abandoned on the ground. Her fingers trembled as she lifted each morsel to her lips, her sunken eyes darting nervously, as though expecting to be chased away at any moment. A group of young men nearby noticed her too. Without hesitation, one of them grabbed a thick piece of wood, and with a cruel smirk, he led the others in chasing the woman away. "Get out of here, you mad old witch!" They jeered, laughing as she stumbled in fright. Ogum's heart clenched. Her hands trembled as she dropped the serving spoon she was holding. Without a second thought, she ran toward the scene, her voice cutting through the laughter. "How can you be this heartless? She is an elderly woman, old enough to be your mother. God forbid she's my mother. We were only trying to help you, and now you're insulting us?" He spat on the ground and stormed off with his friends, their laughter fading into the morning crowd. Her attention was solely on the trembling old woman who stood frozen in shock. Gently, she reached for her hand. "Come, Mama," she whispered. She led the woman back to her food stall, pulled out a clean plate, and heaped it with steaming rice, thick banga soup, and 5 generous pieces of meat. The woman's eyes widened in disbelief. Tears welled in Ogum's eyes as she watched the old woman eat, ravenously, desperately, as though she had been starving for days. Without hesitation, Ogum reached into her cooler, pulled out a bottle of chilled Coke, and placed it beside her. "Drink, Mama," she said softly. As the old woman wiped her mouth, Ogum leaned in, her curiosity piqued. "What happened to you? How did you end up like this?" "I don't know," she murmured. "I can't remember anything. I don't even know where I came from." A single tear slipped down her wrinkled cheek. She reached for Ogum's hands and squeezed them tightly. "You are the only one who has shown me kindness. May God bless you, my daughter." Ogum's chest tightened. "Amen, Mama. I promise you I'll help you. I lost my mother when I was a baby. I know what it means to be without one." She offered the old woman a warm smile. "You can stay with me." The old woman gasped, her hands covering her mouth in shock. "You would do that for me?" Ogum nodded. That evening, after selling all her food for the day, she led the old woman back to her tiny apartment. It was modest but warm. She boiled hot water for the woman to bathe, laid out fresh clothes, and together they shared a quiet dinner before retiring for the night. The first rays of dawn crept through the cracks in the wooden window as Ogum rose to prepare for another busy day. She moved with practiced ease, turning steaming pots of rice into warmers and seasoning the stew with expert hands. Just as she covered the last pot, a piercing scream shattered the morning calm. Ogum's heart lurched. "Where am I?" The voice echoed through the narrow corridors of the Face Me, I Face You compound, startling the neighbors awake. Without hesitation, Ogum ran toward her room, pushing past the gathering tenants. "You're safe, Mama." Ogum rushed to her side, speaking softly as she reached for her shoulders. "I brought you here yesterday. You were on the streets. You had nowhere to go." Her gaze darting around the unfamiliar room. "Yesterday? I don't remember." Ogum swallowed hard. This was unexpected. The woman had seemed lucid last night. What had changed? The murmurs of the gathered neighbors grew louder. Some watched with curiosity, others with concern, but one voice cut through them all, the landlord's. "Ogum, I know you have a good heart, but this is Nigeria. Sometimes your kindness can land you in trouble. Thank you for your advice, sir, but I will be careful." With that, she turned back to the old woman. She plated a fresh serving of rice and beans. As Ogum stood up, she turned to the neighbors. "Please, help me look after her while I'm away. Mama, I have to go and sell my food. Please stay inside. Eat, rest, don't go anywhere." Every few weeks, she would take her to the market, buying her fresh fruits and simple but elegant clothes. The transformation was undeniable. Mama, once frail and forgotten, now carried herself with a quiet grace, even if her mind still wandered. Ogum's neighbors adored her. Even the children had taken it upon themselves to keep an eye on Mama, running after her whenever she strayed too far. "Mama, don't go. Stay with Auntie Ogum," they would cry, tugging gently at her clothes until she turned back with a confused smile. Most days, Ogam no longer left Mama at home. She took her along to the food stall, seating her on a small wooden bench by the side as she served her customers. Her little kitchen, once a humble setup, had grown into something extraordinary. Word of her famous rice and beans, paired with banga soup, spread beyond the usual pedestrians. Taxi drivers, market women, and even wealthy businessmen now stopped by, eager to taste the meal that everyone was talking about. Ogam, you are a kind soul. The world needs more people like you, they would say, pressing extra naira notes into her hands. Far away, in one of the grandest mansions in Imo State, Mr. Obinna Okeke, better known as Mr. Obi, was losing hope. For weeks, he had searched every corner of his hometown, combing the streets, questioning locals, putting up posters, and even offering a 10 million reward for anyone who found his mother. As a boy, Obinna had watched his mother struggle, watched her wipe her tears in the dark, hiding bruises under her expensive lace wrappers. He knew she endured it all so that he could have the best life. That was why, from a young age, he had vowed never to depend on his father's wealth. He had taught himself everything: business, real estate. He had built an empire from the ground up, determined to give his mother the life she never had. She was supposed to live in comfort, in safety, not be lost on the streets like a common beggar. The price she had to pay cost her mental health. The day he received the call that Mama had gone missing, he had been in the middle of a business meeting. He didn't hesitate. Within an hour, he was on his private jet, heading back to Imo State, his heart pounding with dread. He had stormed into the mansion, demanding answers. "What exactly am I paying you for?" He had roared at the maids, his voice shaking with fury. The house staff cowered before him, stammering excuses. But it was the security guard, Mr. Silas, who finally spoke up. "Sir, Mama sometimes wandered off, but I always brought her back." Obi saw red. In one swift motion, he struck Silas across the face. "You knew she wandered off, and you didn't think to tell me?" His chest heaved as rage and guilt crashed over him. He had been too busy, too caught up in work to visit often. He had believed that providing wealth and security was enough, but he had been wrong. He personally led search teams through every village, combing the forests, the rivers, even abandoned buildings. But after a month, there was still no sign of her. The police advised him to return to Lagos. "We will do our job, sir. There's little you can do here." Obi had no choice. He left behind a bag filled with cash, instructing the police chief, "Find my mother. Spare no expense. Call me the moment you have news." Before leaving, he also reached out to local radio and TV stations, broadcasting a desperate plea to the people of Imo State: 10 million for anyone who finds my mother. With a heavy heart, he boarded his jet back to Lagos, unaware that the very mother he searched for sat under a bridge, eating rice and beans, in the care of a woman named Ogam. Obi had spent the last 5 months drowning in regret. Each night, he woke up in a cold sweat, haunted by thoughts of his mother, where she might be, whether she was safe, or if she even remembered him at all. He had worked tirelessly for years, building his empire, pushing himself to the brink, all for one reason: to give his mother the life she never had. Now, that very life had slipped through his fingers. He remembered her soft voice, the way she would plead with him, "Obinna, my son, get married. Let me carry my grandchildren before I leave this world." He had always brushed her off, thinking there was time. Now, time was his greatest enemy. His businesses suffered. He no longer had the drive to close new deals or expand his empire. One evening, as he sat in his silent mansion, his closest friend, Femi, arrived. "Guy, this isn't you. Look at yourself. I know you're hurting, but you can't go on like this. Your mother wouldn't want you to waste away like this. You know what? We're going out. You need to eat real food, not all these tasteless dishes your chef makes. We're going for some correct banga soup with bushmeat." Mr. Obi raised a brow. "You want me to eat at a local joint? Trust me. This isn't just any joint. It's under the bridge, and the food is legendary. Palm wine so fresh it'll make you forget your worries." "Fine, let's go." As they drove, Femi couldn't stop talking about the food. "Guy, I'm telling you, the woman running the place, Ogam, her cooking is something else. You'll see people lining up before she even opens. She's that good." But as they pulled up under the bridge, he was surprised. A small crowd had already gathered, waiting. This is bad business. How can someone attract so many customers and not be open on time? A group of men sitting nearby overheard him and turned to him. "Oga, don't be offended. I promise you, the wait is worth it. but the reason she's late is because she takes care of an old woman. I lost my mother 6 months ago in emo state. We searched everywhere, but till today, nothing. The table fell silent. Then, one by one, the men murmured their sympathies. Minutes later, Ogum arrived, her customers rushing forward to help her unload her pots. She smiled warmly, apologizing for the delay. Sorry for keeping you all waiting. As she set her steaming pot of banga soup on the fire, she began to serve her customers. When she reached Mr. Obi's table, an elderly man nearby asked, Ogum, you didn't come with Mama today? She smiled. No, Ogapal, I let her rest at home today. Mr. Obi's spoon paused midair. Mama? Femi noticed the way he had suddenly stiffened. Obi, are you okay? It was just a coincidence. Mama was a common title for elderly women. Shaking off his thoughts, he ordered the largest plate of banga soup with bush meat. Feeling generous, he also paid for everyone's food. A cheer erupted. Thank you for your kindness. You've made my day. Now I can go home early, and Mama will be so happy. Mr. Obi smiled, though something inside him stirred. I'm glad to help. Your story touched me, and I admire what you've done for that woman. Good people are hard to find these days. I'll definitely be coming back. As she packed extra food for him to take home. The next morning, he found himself craving for the food. Without hesitation, he got into his car and drove back to Ogum's joint. As he sat, he overheard people chatting about how well Mama was doing now. Ogum really transformed that woman. You wouldn't believe she was once eating off the streets. She doesn't even look mad anymore. She just lost her memory, that's all. Lost her memory? A chill ran down Mr. Obi's spine. He turned to one of the men. What do you mean she lost her memory? Nobody really knows where she came from. She doesn't remember anything about herself. Before he could say anything else, Ogum arrived. She barely had time to settle before Mr. Obi approached her. Ogum, I'd love to meet Mama. That evening, Ogum led Mr. Obi through the narrow streets to her small apartment. As they stepped inside, he froze. For a split second, she looked up, her familiar dark eyes locking onto his. Mama. But she didn't react. She looked at him without recognition. His mother didn't know who he was. I don't know you, my son. I'm sorry. Ogum, watching them, felt her heart clench. Obi fell to his knees, taking her hands in his. Mama, it's me, your son, your only child. That night, Mr. Obi refused to leave. He sat by her side, talking to her, reminding her of everything. And then, as dawn broke, something happened. She whispered, Obina? His breath hitched. He grabbed her hands, pressing them to his forehead. Yes, Mama, it's me, your son, Obina. Mama, who had been lost for 6 months, broke down in tears, wailing as she clung to him. Obi, my son, my Obina. The streets outside filled with people. News spread like wildfire. The mad woman, she's Mr. Obi's mother? The billionaire? Ogum saved his mother without even knowing it? Everyone was in shock. You saved my mother. You gave her dignity. You showed her love when even I failed to. I owe you everything. Ogum shook her head. I did what any good person would do. He smiled, shaking his head. No, not everyone would have done what you did. Ogum, I want to change your life the way you changed mine. I want to help you. Let me expand your business. Let me build you a real restaurant. Let me give you everything you deserve. The crowd gasped. Within a month, Mr. Obi bought Ogum a massive restaurant in the heart of Lagos. Now her name was known across the city. As a token of her appreciation, she invited Ogum to move into her son's grand mansion in Lagos. As time passed, the love between Ogum and Mr. Obi only deepened. Their home was soon filled with even greater joy when Ogum gave birth to twin daughters, the embodiment of their love. True love is built on kindness, patience, and genuine care.
Please do well to like and subscribe to this channel. Please leave a comment and tell us how you enjoyed the story. Bye.